Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, May 12th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 114 days. The game against Michigan in 198 days. May is one of the quieter months on the college football calendar, but we are not all that far from June, and June is when things are really going to ramp up again as official visits start for the summer. Summer camp season starts. It is, you typically think of June as a very quiet month in the college football calendar, and not anymore. It's not. We're going to be talking today to our good buddy Alex Gleitman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He's been tracking all the guys who are making official visits and unofficial visits coming up this summer to Ohio State, and it is a long list of current commits, top targets, some commits to other schools, whole bunch of names to know here. And Alex, I guess let's start with the fact that you can take they resisted a rule change that really potentially is a significant change in the recruiting world. You used to only be able to take 5 official visits. They just changed that. You can now take as many official visits as you want to. So theoretically, if I wanted to go visit all 131 FBS teams, I theoretically could do that. How does that change things on Ohio State's end? Is that good news for Ohio State? Is that just make it a headache? How does that change the world of recruiting for Ohio State?
I think it goes both ways. What I'm actually not clear about is, I think there was a limit on how many official visits the schools were allowed to host. I don't know if that end of it has changed to unlimited versus, I think it was, I forget the numbers, maybe 30 or something like that they were allowed to host in a given cycle. So that definitely plays a factor in it, because if that has changed to unlimited as well, and by the way, this kicks in July 1st, so you're not going to see anyone take 6 official visits before June 30th. You'll probably see 5 official visits in June, and then maybe some during the season or in July for some guys. But I think it goes both ways, right? For Ohio State, and I know this is someone we'll talk about in a little bit, but you got a guy like Jeremiah Smith. If you're Jeremiah Smith, you're committed to Ohio State, but you have every school in the country after you. Normally, you got 5 official visits. Maybe you take Ohio State and maybe you take a couple others just to make sure you have backups. But, anyone will take that kid on their campus. So, why not have an awesome weekend, all expenses paid with Miami? Why not go to USC and have an all expense? You only go through this process once, and I'm not saying that, you should be wasting coaches' times. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, or, in Jeremiah Smith's case, the right thing to do for Ohio State. But, think about an uncommitted kid. If he has 8 schools that are on his top 8, why not take officials to all 8 of those schools, even if you're not going to 4 of them? I just think it's in that regard, it's going to be tough for Ohio State, because some guys that are committed, or you're only going up against 3 schools or 4 other schools that are getting official visits. Now that could be 9 schools or 10 schools that are getting official visits. But on the other side of the coin, right, I think you have an opportunity. There's some guys out there that I think Ohio State is I would consider them a top, maybe 8 school or 10 school for, but realistically, they're probably not among the 3 to 4 that are likely going to get a certain kid. But now they kind of get an extra swing and an extra at bat to try to hit a home run with a kid like that. And who knows, maybe you do change his mind by getting him on campus for a big game, like the Penn State game or something like that at some point this year. So I think it could go both ways, where you might get a chance to get a kid on campus that in a normal year you wouldn't have been able to do. But I also think that keeping the guys you have, or keeping tabs on the guys that you feel good about, or that you're in the top mix for, I think that's going to be a little bit more challenging.
And I guess we should probably just define our terms here, because I'm sure not everyone follows the nitty-gritty of recruiting well enough to understand the difference between an official visit and an unofficial visit. An official visit, the school pays the tab. So the school pays for your flight, and they'll pay for your hotel and all that kind of stuff. An unofficial visit, you can make as many unofficial visits as you want to. There are local commits who we see at Ohio State for every single game, for a whole bunch of practices during the fall. You can make as many unofficial visits as you want to, but the key is you have to pick up the tab. So if you are from, Will Smith Jr., for example, coming from Dublin last year, we saw a whole heck of a lot of Will Smith Jr., because that's about $6 worth of gas or something like that, and you're down at campus. If you are coming from California and making an unofficial visit, well, you got to pay for the plane ticket, you got to pay for the hotel, all that kind of stuff. So that's the difference between an official and an unofficial visit, just in case people are wondering what the distinction is. So let's talk about some of the big visits that are coming up. And if you look at Ohio State's recruiting class for 2024 right now, it is pretty lopsided. They're not quite full on the offensive side of the ball, but they're getting there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they're just starting to build that class. So we're really going to be focusing on the defensive side of the ball on this show. Some of the big names who are going to be visiting in June coming up soon. Let's start on the defensive line, and a couple names to know: Marquise Lightfoot, Dylan Stewart, among others. Is there a visit that you have your eyes on in terms of either, boy, this could be a huge visit for Ohio State to kind of change the complexion of this recruitment, or this is a guy who could be on commitment watch when he gets to Columbus?
Yeah, I think Marquise Lightfoot, I don't, just the way this process is going, I don't see him taking an official visit and making a commitment out of nowhere. And same thing for Dylan Stewart. I think those are two elite defensive linemen that are going to probably take all 5, if not maybe a couple more now, official visits. And they're going to go through the process. But I think Marquise Lightfoot and Dylan Stewart, Ohio State, if they're not the leader right now, which I think they might be for both, they're definitely a top 2 or 3 schools. So these official visits are going to be key. But I think guys like this, I could see either of them going the whole distance and like waiting till closer to signing day or signing day to decide potentially, or an all-star game. But, and that will be the case if they don't do it by the end of the summer. I think both of them intend to, going into their senior season, be able to know where they're going and make a commitment. If they announce it, I don't know, but I think that is kind of both of their intentions right now. So I think that they'll go through the process, take their official visits in June, and then, maybe sometime in the month of July, make that decision and make it public. But as you said, Tom, like the dynamic has completely changed. Some guys might want to just take more official visits. They might want to go to a big game and wait for that. So, and they could commit and then still do that. So I don't think any of those guys are like commit on the spot type of guys. I think the process for most kids is, let me take all my official visits in June. I think there's a dead period in the first few weeks of July before I believe that last weekend of the month opens back up. But I think it's kind of like, let me take a deep breath. Let me sit down, think about everything, and make, a decision not based on emotion or a good official visit. So, sometimes if you know, but I think with the guys we're talking about here, I don't expect a quick turn commitment off of an official visit.
And then let's take one step back from the defensive line to the linebacker position. One name that kind of caught my eye was Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa. He is out of St. John Bosco, out of California. That is the same school that produced Wyatt Davis, among others. That is a school that Ohio State has gotten some talent out of over the years. He's also at the same school as a guy we're going to talk about at the safety spot in just another minute. But, where is he someone who is, is this something where they're maybe sort of in the mix? Is this something where this could be something that sort of seals the deal with him? Where do things stand right now with Kyngstonn?
Yeah, I mean, I really like Ohio State's positioning, and I've been saying that for a while. I am nervous just because of USC, quote unquote, being back. They're definitely, they were a win against Utah away from being in the college football playoff in Lincoln Riley's first year. I would not be surprised if they are in the college football playoff this year. And, it's Ohio State, it's Notre Dame, and it's USC in that one for me. I think Ohio State leads, but just the proximity to home, it's a little concerning for me with USC. The proximity to home, USC kind of on the up. I mean, that's he plays for a St. John Bosco program where Ohio State has had success with Court Williams and Wyatt Davis. Almost had a few other guys out of that program over the last couple of years. So there is a history there, but USC was kind of a little bit down when that happened. I don't know. Notre Dame's in it. Al Washington was the first guy to offer him a scholarship. He was actually at Ohio State when he did that. He's at Notre Dame, but one of the guys he had his best relationship with at Notre Dame, James Laurinaitis, is now at Ohio State. So I don't want to discount Notre Dame. I think that they've done really well in California. They produced really good linebackers that have made the NFL. But I think it's Ohio State and USC, and if I had to pick today, I would go with Ohio State. But I think these official visits are really going to be key now that Kyngston's narrowed it down to those 3 schools to kind of see where he feels most comfortable, where he feels he fits in best. And I think that's really what his decision is going to be based on, because I think all the other criteria that go into the decision, he's kind of already like filtered through, and that's how he got to these 3 schools. So now it's just, I think, more of a feel of like, what's home? He's going to know a lot of guys at USC. I know he's very comfortable at Ohio State. So I think these visits are huge for him to just spend time around the players, spend time around other recruits, obviously spend more time around the coaches. And, he's coming on a weekend. I think it's the June 23rd weekend. You're going to have Peyton Pierce, who's already committed to Ohio State up here. That's a guy who he might be playing right next to if he does choose to come to Ohio State. You're going to have a couple other guys, Bryce West, Damarian Witten, who I feel pretty good about Ohio State landing. I'm sure, some of the committed guys, even if they're coming another weekend, will try to make it up that weekend. So he'll get to spend some time around some key people that he might be future teammates with if he were going to be at Ohio State. And I think, that weekend is going to, I love Ohio State getting the last visit. Not that it really matters. You want the best visit, not the last visit. But I just love Ohio State not only potentially having the chance to have that best visit, but also kind of being that last impression before I think he kind of burrows down and goes into decision mode.
Well, the weekend before that, they're going to be welcoming two really, really big safety prospects. One is KJ Bolden. He is a 5-star and a Georgia native. The other is Peyton Woodyard. He goes to the same high school as Kyngstonn, Viliamu-Asa, but he is a Georgia commit right now. They are both visiting on the same weekend, June 16th to 18th, and you have all this tracked, and you have all these, here's the weekends that the guys who are currently committed are visiting. This weekend, they've got a bunch of top guys. Dylan Stewart's visiting that same weekend. There are no current commits visiting that weekend. So, there is always a strategy to all of this stuff. So I'm going to guess that some of the currently committed guys may show up on unofficials that week to sort of hang out. But what is the thinking there where you have some of these really top prospects on campus, but they're there on officials and you don't have any current commits on officials that weekend?
Yeah, that's for now. Let's see how things flip around. I know, for example, Aaron Nolan's scheduled to, come in on June 9th, but I think he can't make it that weekend, so he's going to shift to a later weekend. I think that to my point, you're going to have commits coming, shifting their dates around and things like that. And then you're also going to have, especially the in-state guys or regional guys coming on the weekend in the summer when they probably don't have that much going on. They're just going to be coming into town to kind of help recruit. So, those are two huge targets. You mentioned KJ Bolden, Peyton Woodyard. There's a few, that weekend's looking right now like it's maybe going to be the biggest weekend of the 3 or 4 in the month of June. Xavier Brown from California, Charles Lester from Florida, Miles Lockhart from Arizona, Dylan Stewart, Boo Carter from Tennessee. There's going to be a few others, and some of those are going to change. They're going to drop. They're going to be added. I think Ohio State's obviously always hoping to get as many commits as possible every single weekend to make these guys feel comfortable. They're all in group chats together. They're all talking on social media. So I think, I wouldn't worry about who's scheduled right now. And, I think, look, Ohio State's going to shoot their shot with a lot of these guys that I just mentioned. And, I think they wouldn't be getting official visits if they didn't have a really good shot. You mentioned KJ Bolden. I think it's probably Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama. I'd probably say Ohio State you can't count Alabama. So I'll say one of those 3 schools. He's cousin of Perry Eliano. Peyton Woodyard, I think, is going to be tough to flip from Georgia, but they just got an unofficial. Now they're getting an official. They felt like they came up second, just short, when he made his decision in early January. So, these visits are the opportunity. Again, the criteria has been set, which is by these kids, which is they've kind of okay, all the schools I'm taking these official visits to, check the boxes on how they use me, check the boxes on can develop me for whatever my goals are, NFL or otherwise. I'm comfortable with the coaching staff. I, play early, whatever it is, right? I think now these visits are really just, again, the opportunity to make someone feel comfortable and feel at home. Because at the end of the day, just think about you as anyone out there, making their normal decision for college. Obviously, there are other factors, financials and, the certain program that you want to major in and all that. But after you filter it down to the schools that you're seriously considering, it's really more at that point about where do you feel comfortable going? Where do you see yourself most? And I think that's the same for these kids who are making these decisions for football.
So I think Ohio State fans are very excited that Peyton Woodyard is visiting, despite being committed to Georgia, and Ohio State still, potentially has a shot there. The flip side of that coin, you mentioned Jeremiah Smith earlier, and he's committed to Ohio State. There is no real indication that there's any cause for concern, I don't think, there. But he's also visiting Florida and Georgia. So, that's I think Ohio State fans probably looking at that and going, why would you do that? You're supposed to be committed. And then also welcoming in Peyton Woodyard with open arms while he's committed to Georgia, and that, this is happening all across the country. That's not just these two players. How much cause for concern is there with Jeremiah Smith? Is this just sort of kicking the tires, having a plan B, or is this, DEFCON 2 or something that Ohio State might be at risk of losing the top receiver in the class?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about Jeremiah Smith. As long as Brian Hartline's at Ohio State, I think Ohio State will sign Jeremiah Smith. I think he's taken visits throughout the process. I think he's seen, he's been around the block. Leave his obviously, you see where he comes from, the South Florida Express program, Chaminade Madonna, prominent program in South Florida. He obviously has friends. He has, whatever that's gone through the process. He has family members, Geno Smith, quarterback for the Seahawks, that have gone through the process. His uncle, Geno Smith Sr., has, South Florida Express coach, has guided these kids, many kids throughout the process. They know what this is about. I think they're pretty confident that Ohio State is the place they're going to be, but hey, Ryan Day leaves for an NFL job. New England Patriots, Bill Belichick steps down and Ryan Day takes that job. What does that mean, right? Does a new coach come in? Is Brian Hartline? I'd imagine they'd want Brian Hartline part of that staff, but is that enough? Does he need Ryan Day there? If Brian Hartline gets a head coaching job and wants to take that, is, there a good enough relationship there for him to stay? There's just so many different variables that can happen. No one saw, some of the things that happened this offseason with the coaching carousel, and that's the same case for every single year. No one 2 years ago saw Lincoln Riley going from Oklahoma to USC, or Brian Kelly going from Notre Dame to LSU. So much can happen as we inch closer to signing day in December, that I think the Smith camp just wants to, A, take advantage of the process, and B, just have a backup plan in case something doesn't go the way that they expect it to go with Ohio State.
All right, so maybe take a slight step back in from the ledge there if you were a little concerned about that, but we will, of course, be continuing to monitor that and everything else that we talked about today and much, much more at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Alex has, as I said, on the huddle board for our members, a running tally of who's visiting when, and it is an enormous list that just keeps growing, and, changes coming every week. So you want to keep track of all of that and what it all means. A great place to do that is at BuckeyeHuddle.com. In addition to all of those visits, all of those camps, we also, Mark and Kevin right now are on their southern swing, hitting up some of the very big names down south that Ohio State is tracking. They just visited with the number one offensive lineman in the class of 2025. We'll have Mark and Kevin on the morning show sometime probably early next week to talk about some of the guys they've talked to, some of the guys they've seen and met. This is a very unique time of year where they get to see a lot of players in a lot of different spots and start building those comfort and relationships. Important with recruiting. Comfort and relationships also important with recruiting coverage. And that's why these guys are two of the best, along with Alex, at tracking all that stuff, getting you the inside information you are looking for, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.